Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for today's discussion. Today, we're going to be talking again about the fall of the Christian colleges and universities across our country into the wokeness or the social justice warrior mentality or the social Marxism or whatever you want to label it. It's that leftist socialist leaning that is sweeping the country right now. The secular universities, of course, are all in on the secular social justice warrior Marxist cultural Marxism. You'll hear terms like white supremacy, systemic racism, white privilege. You'll hear things like male privilege, whiteness, white spaces, equity, um, inequality. You'll hear all of these words that are trying to do something that we've never tried to do in all of our history, and that is to produce equality of outcome. So the social scientists look at the landscape of our country and they see that certain demographics don't earn as much as other demographics. And so the goal then is, okay, we must impose equality of outcome. They also look at women and men in the workplace, and they find that women on average make somewhat less than men on average. And so the goal then becomes, okay, we have to impose an equality of outcome, not an equality of opportunity, because that is a legitimate goal. We want to give everyone the opportunity. We want to give them a level playing field. But now the social justice warriors want to make its equality of outcome. So you have then things like affirmative action that impose a quota of based on skin color and ethnicity in universities, acceptance levels, and so forth. And the Christian colleges in our country, I'm sad to say, because I went through the Christian college system. I went undergraduate to Wheaton College, Illinois. I went to master's level study at Trinity. Now it's called Trinity University in Deerfield, Michigan, Deerfield, Illinois. And then I went to Fuller Seminary out in Pasadena, California. And these institutions are falling for this social Marxism, this cultural Marxism. And I'm going to read an article that was posted on the internet, put out by the Federalist Society. And they have made an observation. The author here has made an observation about what is happening in Christian colleges and universities across our country. And it's going to be shocking to read this. And if you're a parent and you're sending your young person to a college that is called Christian, you better be aware that they're going to absorb a lot of secular ideas. They're going to become indoctrinated, not as much as the state college and university, but they will be indoctrinated nevertheless. So let's bring up that article and read what it has to say about the state of Christian education in our country. And you will be shocked, and we'll make commentary as we go. So this article talks about, don't assume because a college is Christian, it's a safe place for your kid. Christian higher education, like many other parts of Christian culture and church life, follows broader cultural trends, and those trends are distinctively anti-Christian. So you have to be aware that Christian colleges and universities are influenced by the secular, socialist, leftist-leaning culture, the dominant culture, just like every institution is influenced. So don't think, hey, I can send my kid to Wheaton College, I can send my kid to Taylor University, I can send my kid to Calvin College in Michigan, I can send my kid here or there because it's got Christian on the label and it has a chapel service. No, you can't assume that your kid is going to get a thorough Christian education, especially a Christian worldview, because they just might indoctrinate your child in leftist ideology, which is becoming more and more the thing at Christian colleges. In the late 19th and early 20th century, several Christian colleges were founded as a response to the leftward drift of the American Liberal Arts College. These new institutions sought to provide a uniquely Christian and conservative higher education. That's the original vision. Many of these schools were founded as Bible or training institutes: Moody Bible Institute, Biola, Missionary Training Institute of New York. I believe that's in Nyack. Their curriculum was different because focused on the Bible and less on professional training and aristocratic grooming. Their goals were different. Rather than developing standard degree programs and academic accreditation, they focused on training a generation of missionaries, pastors, and Sunday school teachers to spread the gospel, the Christian gospel. So, uniquely Christian education. And they left out here in the article, to form a Christian way of thinking, a Christian worldview, to have a consistent Christian mentality. When you look out at the world, you don't just use the best secular scholarship, you use the biblical truth that God has revealed in His Word, and then you filter everything through that. You're not opposed to secular education and scholarship, but it has to fall in line with what God has revealed in His Word. That is the way the Christian lives. He doesn't live by the secular scholarship of the day. He lives by the biblical divine revelation. So God gets the priority in our thinking. Yet during the 20th century, those Bible institutes turned into Bible colleges, which then turned into universities. We've seen that over the last few decades. For example, Bible Institute of Los Angeles became Biola University. Nearly all of them are now regionally accredited, the gold standard of academic higher education, and offer a slew of liberal arts and vocational majors similar to secular counterparts. Now, this is where the Trojan horse comes in, the accreditation process. And this is where the leverage of the secular culture comes in. In order to maintain their accreditation, they have to, in subtle ways, compromise, unfortunately. And some do so more than others. And we'll see on a range, we'll see different colleges compromising more and compromising less. So it depends on the institution and the leadership at the given time as to how compromised they are. 100 years later, how distinctively Christian and evangelical are these schools? In many ways, unfortunately, perhaps not as distinctive as one would think. They're still very religious, with all the trappings of evangelicalism, but in some areas, traditional Christianity is in the crosshairs, especially in matters of sexuality and politics. And I have been chronicling how Wheaton College, my old alma mater, where I earned a bachelorate, has been drifting socially into the social justice woke narrative. The leftist, democratic talking points are more commonly found now at Wheaton than they were 25 years ago. In fact, the last two presidential elections, Wheaton College has gone predominantly Democrat, pro-abortion Democrat, pro-LGBTQ Democrat, pro-transgender Democrat, pro-socialist Democrat. The Wheaton College, here is this flagship evangelical institution that's supposed to be developing a Christian worldview in the students. It is now caving in and compromising to the secular world. So it's not as distinct as it was. Opposition to Pence because he's not woke. Woke is a term now used to describe someone who has come on board to the liberal leftist socialist agenda. Concrete examples risk unfair tarnishing, but for one example, consider Taylor University, a fairly representative evangelical college and a member of the Council of Christian Colleges and Universities. They're conventional enough that they chose the most prominent national evangelical politician to be their 2019 graduation speaker, Vice President Mike Pence, a former congressman and governor of Taylor's home state, Indiana. So Taylor, the Christian college, invited Mike Pence to be the commencement speaker. Pence is an outspoken evangelical both in public and private. Long before he was Donald Trump's vice president, he was Indiana evangelical. He was the governor of Indiana. That's what has been known for since he entered politics in 2000. So the pick was conventional and in many ways a coup. How many small Christian schools could nab the country's vice president for their graduation speaker? I might add, at my graduation at Wheaton College, the commencement speaker was none other than George Herbert Walker Bush. So Wheaton snagged a vice president as well. And George Herbert Walker Bush, as far as we know, was a Christian. I think Anglican, but still he held to the Christian worldview. But that was 20-some years ago. What a surprise, then, that the Pence invitation stirred up a backlash. Students loudly complained that his visit would make them feel unsafe. This is the woke mentality. Safe spaces, Twinkie snowflakes, that Pence did not represent the values of the institution and that he was too closely associated with Donald Trump. So all of a sudden, here is a Christian college bringing in an evangelical Christian, a professed evangelical Christian, one of the most high-profile evangelical Christians in the country, and the students were protesting his presence on the campus of a Christian college. Totally inconceivable. In spite of his evangelical credentials, he was a bad choice because his presence made the college, quote, complicit in the Trump-Pence administration's policies, which we believe are not consistent with the Christian ethical love we hold dear, close quote. So here is an unlikely spectacle. Students at an ostensibly conservative evangelical university protesting over having a mainstream conservative evangelical speaker at graduation. Student activism around the country is often encouraged and abetted by university faculty and staff, and that is the truth here at Taylor. You can bet that there were Taylor faculty and staff and administrators all encouraging students to do this. The recent $40 million lawsuit against Oberlin College, for example, happened because an administrator helped students spread libel, accusing a local bakery of a long-term racism. Without any evidence, this administrator helped students distribute pamphlets and host rallies, all based on a baseless accusation. Student energy drove the protest, but the college staff played a big part. The lawsuit will cost Oberlin a lot of money. Now, I don't consider Oberlin an evangelical institution. If you know anything about it, this was the college founded by Charles Finney centuries ago, and now it has gone totally liberal. So Oberlin is not an evangelical institution, but Taylor is. At Taylor, the faculty may be even farther left than the students. Several joined with students and walked out of Pence's graduation speech. Get this, a Christian college faculty enclave got up in the middle of his speech and walked out in protest. He's a Christian. He's an evangelical. He's on their side. And yet politically leftist faculty members thought it was so important that they tell the world that they do not agree with Mike Pence. Even before Pence's arrival, the faculty debated whether it supported bringing him to the commencement speaker. They voted 61-49 against having him speak. So the faculty was against him speaking. At this supposedly Christian college, the administration brought him in anyway. Good for them, of course, but it was a strong expression of the left-leaning position of the faculty. And I saw that way back in the day when I went to Wheaton College. It was totally obvious that the faculty at Wheaton College 20-some years ago was far to the left politically, more liberal, more socialist-leaning, more secular than the students. And in fact, if I remember correctly, the faculty got together and actually circulated, when I was in Wheaton College, circulated a letter encouraging students to vote for the Democrat candidate, the pro-abortion Democrat candidate. Totally inconsistent with the Christian worldview. Christians should never be voting or promoting in any way someone who pushes abortion, the murder of children in the womb. What about the image of God? What about all men being made equal in our Constitution that gets its total foundation from the Genesis account where God made them male and female and made them in his image? What about the part, thou shalt not murder? What about the Ten Commandments there? The faculty were encouraging students to vote against the Christian moral values. This isn't about Trump, it's about dissipating theology. If opposition to Pence were the only evidence, you might wonder whether Taylor's faculty is simply being consistently conservative. Perhaps they are never Trumpers, concerned about Trump's less than ideal behavior. Some evangelicals certainly seem to be defending the indefensible for Trump. Were Taylor faculty simply resisting that trend? Unfortunately, no. The resistance came from the left. So these are leftist professors at Taylor University, a Christian, so-called evangelical Christian college. Back in the 2018, a small group of faculty and staff tried to start a conservative underground newsletter around Taylor's campus. Not because they were pro-Trump, but because the standard evangelical viewpoints on issues such as marriage, creation, abortion, racial equality were being systematically suppressed in favor of a leftist opinion on these issues. Okay, so again, the leftism of colleges and universities is spilling now over into Christian colleges and universities and seminaries. These underground conservative faculty claimed there was a growing acceptance of permissivist views of human sexuality, hostility toward creationist perspectives, and uncritical endorsement of liberal progressive ideals in the form of Marxist-inspired critical race theory, CRT. Again, this is the newest trend in the secular colleges and universities, and it's now being picked up and repeated in the colleges that call themselves Christian. I've heard this on the campus of Wheaton College. It comes in the diversity departments, and they've hired a person who is in charge of multicultural engagement at Wheaton College. They're pumping out this critical race theory. They're all in on the critique of American society as systemically racist and white supremacy, and the whole talking points of the left has been imbibed and is now being disseminated to the students by the faculties of these colleges and the administrators, I might add. They felt that a separate publication was necessary to argue for the conservative stance boldly, extensively, and without fear of editorial filter. If the campus was so right-leaning that they couldn't stomach Trump, there would have been no need for this alternative publication. The reality is simply this. At an ostensibly conservative Christian university, a minority of faculty and staff felt compelled to draw attention to the silencing of ordinary conservative evangelical viewpoints. So then it goes on to talk about Taylor should not be unfairly singled out. Wheaton College, a flagship Christian institution, recently made news after a faculty member said Christian and Muslims worship the same God. NPR wrote last year about how evangelical institutions are grappling with the culture's press for affirming LGBT sexuality, pushing for colleges to abandon Christian teachings on identity politics topics are strengthening. So the pressure is coming from the culture, the secular institutions of our culture, the accreditation boards. It's coming from the government. It's coming from these, now with the new liberal leftist Biden administration, executive orders, and from the education secretary papers and mandates that come out. All the pressure is against Christian moral values, and a lot of these colleges are just folding up and obeying their dominant masters of the secular world. Now, here is an important point. Christian higher education, like many other parts of Christian culture and church life, follow broader cultural trends. Unless institutions take extremely strong steps to maintain fidelity to core intellectual and religious commitments, they will eventually follow the trends. Yes, So in other words, unless they deliberately and intentionally put the brakes on, they will follow the drift. Just as students come from the culture of their home churches, so also faculty and staff come through years, often many years, of higher education. In very left-leaning environments, people will drift leftwards unless they position themselves as a resistant minority. So it talks about just as students come from their cultural home churches, they also come from their demographic. And there's a big push right now in all of education to bring in more and more, quote, minority students. So there's something immoral, according to the current consensus on education, that if you are a college like Wheaton College in the Midwest, predominantly white evangelical Midwest, it's not good for you to have a majority of white students, because that means you're racist, you're white supremacist institution. So what you have to do is you have to bring in more and more and more minority students, Black, Latino, Asian, all kinds of demographics. And if you don't have those people being admitted to the college, there's something wrong with you. So what happens is, in order to meet their quotas of minority students, people like Wheaton College, colleges and the Christian college classification, they bring in qualified or not qualified students who are minority. And when you do that on a basis of quotas, you are going to bring in people who do not have a Christian worldview and do not hold to Christian moral standards. They're going to be coming from more liberal churches. They're going to be coming from more leftist, democratic demographics. And then you're bringing them on campus, and they're there because you want to meet your quota of minority percentile. And this confuses everything, because you're bringing in students who normally would not be qualified to enter, not by their skin color or ethnicity, but because of their ideologies, their doctrines, their beliefs, and the lowering of the standards of moral and spiritual qualifications. That's the problem. The people training Christian academics are biased. While you might not need convincing that higher education as a whole is left-leaning, the statistics may be worse than you think. An organization like Heterodox Academy has been systematically documenting and arguing against the increased ideology uniformity present on college campuses, although it seems to be itself a part of the problem. So it goes on and talks about that there were 1,000 psychologists in a room. How many are conservative? I think it says 3 raised their hand. Even in the most conservative academic disciplines, they only have 5 Democrats for every 1 Republican. So it's overwhelmingly, the educational institutions are just stacked with liberals, leftists. The more critical race theory is being learned in the colleges and universities, and then these professors go out and teach at Christian colleges. And usually the idea is you want to try to get the most academically gifted professors to teach at your Christian college. But unfortunately, they have gone to the most secular and radically leftist universities to get their education, and they've been influenced. It says, even seemingly innocuous academic majors are not immune from the now dominant leftward drift. Consider classics. So it goes on and talks about how a once very traditional classics study is now just being inundated by this kind of leftist critical race theory. And so the problem is that, like this article says, don't assume Christian means trustworthy. Christian colleges face a broad array of pressures from students, parents, alumni, professors, board members, staff, donors, states, and federal government. Their Christian heritage clashes with the cultural movements, both on the extreme left and the extreme right. What students want might not match up with what the donors want. Proposed legislation threatens their financial viability. Yet, despite these problems, parents shouldn't necessarily just pull the plug. Christian education today is still, in many ways, excellent. And the deep religious culture of these institutions, Taylor certainly included, can be a wonderful place for spiritual growth. But on matters related to sex, gender, and politics, it is a buyer beware and trust but verify. So this is exactly describing what is taking place at colleges and universities and seminaries across our country. If you look at the information coming out of Wheaton College, you will find that this college is going leftist, they're going Democrat, they're going social justice warrior, they're using the same language with intersectionality. They're thinking in intersectionality, which is basically having a hierarchy of victimization. And then they're taking like minority students and lowering the standard for entrance to the minority students, and then basically building the college or university or seminary around the personal preferences of these minority students. And what it's doing is it's weakening the foundations of a Christian worldview. It's compromising the Christian worldview. We've seen it at Wheaton College. I've been chronicling this for at least 3 years in my videos. I've seen, for example, when a pro-life biracial speaker came to Wheaton College and started criticizing Planned Parenthood for genocide against the black culture because of the abortion industry and how many black babies are killed through abortion, and how that we need to defund Planned Parenthood, and that we need to, and criticizing these leftist institutions like Planned Parenthood. There were students at Wheaton College who complained because this speaker was offending them and they didn't feel safe. It wasn't a safe place for minority students based on this speakers, these pro-life Christian speakers lecture on the dangers of Planned Parenthood, and we need to be consistently pro-life and not allow our politics to and our sociology to violate our Christian values in allowing for abortion or promoting abortion. And these students, these minority students, were offended, and the college was up in arms. Oh, our students are offended, and overreacted. And instead of saying to the students, look, here is a opportunity for you to learn and grow, and you're going to be exposed to a lot of ideas that are offensive to you, that shock you, that you're going to grow at this university. This is a great place to grow. No, they catered and pandered to them. It's the same as giving these little rooms at the secular state universities, these quiet, safe spaces for students who feel offended on campus because their ways were not followed in some way, or their feelings were hurt, or their ideas were conflicting. And so this whole giving into this woke mentality and the social justice warrior mentality and the snowflake mentality and the offense and microaggressions and the whole thing, this is coming to Christian colleges, and Christian parents need to be aware. Christian students need to be aware that this is taking place, and they need to say to themselves, do I really want to attend this college and spend all this money to be indoctrinated in wokeness? Or should I rather go part-time and take classes and not drink in all of this liberal leftist agenda? Should I go to a community college? Should I go to a evangelical Christian college, but be very, very careful and be a resistant warrior? Yes, I would suggest that. Well, hope that's been a helpful analysis, and we'll see you back next week on the program. God bless.